harmonizing with nature. With over 4 decades of changing lives, your self-discovery archaeologist, get ready to be the best of you with your host, Beverly Zymet.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Beverly Zymet Show, where being the best you has just gotten easier. My guest today is Trey Camichel, and he's calling in from
Wimberley, Texas. It's about 45 minutes from Austin.
Oh, I was down in that area over in Kyle a few months ago.
That's awesome. If you ever come back, we'll have to actually meet.
You know, that would be nice. I've had so many people on the show now that I got lots of places I got to go visit. So that's one thing really fun about being the host of a show. You meet these wonderful people all over the country, all over the world. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest things about putting yourself out online in general is you end up with friends all over the world, and if you put yourself out in the right way, then I mean you can show up anywhere and have somewhere to stay.
You know, that is so true. It's gotten to the point, because I've been doing this, I've been on the road since like 97. And when people know I'm coming into that area, it's like they fight. No, you got to come here. You stayed there last time. You got to stay here. You know, it's kind of a nice problem to have, right?
Yeah, that's definitely a good problem to have.
Your shoe beats a hotel, right?
Absolutely.
So, Trey, what do you do down there in Texas?
I'm a business consultant, and I also own a marketing agency. We help people systemize their businesses and set them up to scale, and then we help them get their marketing in place so that they can really pour the gas on that fire once they have a business that can handle it.
Whoa, that sounds interesting. You've been doing that for a long time now?
About 3 years, actually.
Great. I could use some of that with this whole... Yeah, most people can. That's right. You know, it's interesting how things started to shift with the internet. I mean, it's a curse and a blessing at the same time. I used to just go from city to city. My classes would be full when I got there. You know, it was all butts in the seats. And then all of a sudden, one day I woke up and it's like, what's going on? Right? It's like everybody was doing an online course here, an online course there, and they just weren't showing up. And then over the last couple of years, it kind of started coming back in the other direction, right? Not as much, but, to some degree. So, again, if you don't flow with that marketing, you kind of run into a hiccup that sometimes isn't repairable real fast. And it kind of does a number on the bank account and everything else, right?
Yeah, you've got to be showing up online these days if you want your target audience and your prospects to actually find you, or they're just not going to find you, and it's that simple these days.
Yeah, and there's a lot of static out there, and now with this whole situation going on here with the COVID, it seems like there's even more static. And before this even started, I wanted to do another show. And it was like in February when we were putting it all together. I said, I want it really looking professional and crisp and, whatever. And so we got that all designed. We hit the market in March. And we were rolling pretty good. Things were cruising right along. And then the COVID hit. And oh my gosh, I got so inundated for people wanting to be on the show that I had like 900 people just hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, it was insane, but it was enjoyable too, because for me, it's my element, right?
Yeah.
And I do need, assistance on the other side with some of that marketing. It's doing pretty darn good on its own, but I know I've got to get better on some of the other social medias. Facebook is, they're always changing. And, but I want to start getting more direction in LinkedIn and Pinterest, because I feel that those are more that business oriented, and, start getting subscriptions going and things like that. So is this what you do with your business?
So we do a little bit of everything. We have basic business development services where we can actually come in. If you have an idea but you don't have a business yet, and then we can actually step in and help you build the business. We can help you build your online presence. We can help you get yourself ended online. So yeah, we can help people pretty much at any level in their business, all the way from new business owner, just an idea, to they've already got a 7-figure business and they want to turn it into a multiple 7-figure business.
Oh, that sounds interesting. And you make it all like animated and everything?
What do you mean by animated?
Well, I guess where some things will just kind of run on its own versus having to do all of it, individually.
Yeah, so whenever I step into a business, the first thing I do is I look at the 6 pillars of business and what tasks are being completed in their company. And those 6 pillars are marketing, sales, fulfillment, retention, finance, and then human resources and company culture. And if you figure out what tasks need to be completed under each one of those pillars, and you make a list, and then you automate as many of those tasks as possible, and then the tasks that are left you create standard operating procedures for, then you can bring on virtual assistants to complete the rest of the tasks. And then that allows the business owner to step out and focus on making impact and reaching more people.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on that virtual assistant thing? I mean, I've heard pros and cons, and so how would someone actually look for a virtual assistant? What are the questions that you would ask?
So it depends on where you're getting that person from. And ultimately, one thing that I do want to point out is you don't want to try to hire a virtual assistant until you've done that task and you've gotten good results with it. And then you've documented what you did, because a lot of people, they hire a virtual assistant and they throw them into a role to figure out that role. And that never goes well. Whereas if you have a standard operating procedure that is documented, you can bring on pretty much anybody, hand them that piece of paper and say, hey, do these steps. They're a lot likely to pick it up a lot faster, but for some reason people don't really have those documents a lot of the time. It's nuts.
Oh, and that makes sense. I'd never heard that before, coming from that direction, but that really does make sense, because I think a lot of us out here, when you hear virtual assistants, everybody says, get yourself a virtual assistant, it'll free up your time. And it's like, okay, I get that part of it. And, I just kind of put a little thing out there on Facebook one time, looking for a VA, right? And oh my gosh, people were contacting me in Messenger, and they were saying, oh, they could do this and this and this and this. And I'm thinking, I don't even know what I want them to do. I mean, I do, but I don't, right? So what you said makes sense, is to, and I've been doing all of it by myself, and I want to not do it all by myself, but it makes sense to know that what's going to work and what's not, because I guess if you give them what you're doing that isn't working, and then what's sort of working, you're not going to get the results that you're looking for. Like you said, you're going to just keep on getting the same thing. It's just somebody else is doing this, what you were doing, right? Going through the actions.
Yeah, if you need somebody to solve a problem for you that you don't know how to do that task, then you go find an agency, you find a mentor, you find somebody who can help you do that task. And then once you have that documented process that actually works, now you can bring on a virtual assistant. Because typically virtual assistants, they're freelancers who they know how to do the tasks, but they're still learning as they go most of the time.
Okay. All right. Is there any age bracket or country or any little other tips that would be better than one or the other? Because I noticed a lot of the virtual assistants that I was that were responding to me weren't even from this country, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, do they know English? And so can you elaborate a little bit on that when you do get a virtual assistant?
So whenever you bring on the virtual assistant, obviously you want to have them go through the application process, and then you want to get on an interview with them. And you want to be able to walk them through on that interview. You want to be able to walk them through that standard operating procedure, watch them do those tasks before you bring them on as a hire. And actually, a lot of the times when you bring somebody on from overseas, you're gonna pay them less than what you're gonna pay somebody in the U.S., but it's also gonna be enough money that they're gonna be doing very well for where they're at. So they're oftentimes they're even gonna serve you at a higher level than somebody that you bring on from the U.S. because they're happier with that smaller amount of money.
Okay, but that's something to look at. All right. Some of the other 6 little things that you were saying, can you elaborate on those just a little bit so the audience has an idea of what you do if they want to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so this back to the 6 pillars of business. That's the marketing. How are you bringing in customers? Sales. How are you taking them from being part of your audience to actually being in your pipeline, in your funnels, and then closing that deal? And then your fulfillment. How are you fulfilling for that client at the highest level once they are a part of your services? And then you've got your retention. Once you've fulfilled for them at the highest level, what are you doing to retain that person as long as possible? And then hopefully to get testimonials and upsells and referrals and all of those beautiful things so that you're not just out there hustling for clients all the time. And then we look at your finances. Where's your cash flow going? Where is all of your money at? Where do you need to put your money to make more money? And then we look at your human resources and your company culture, which is how you're hiring people and how you're building a culture into your company to where your employees are happy, because your retention is just as important with your employees as it is with your clients. You have to spend that time training a new employee if you lose an employee, so you lose that. So right. That's what I like. Once we know what tasks need to be completed under all 6 of those pillars for your business, then we figure out how many of those tasks can be automated. Can we grab a maybe we can grab a long-term media platform, which would be a podcast, YouTube, anything that you're putting long-form content on that ranks on Google. Maybe we can grab one of these platforms, start making YouTube videos, and then start cutting those YouTube videos up into social media content to save you time, so that you're not always thinking about, oh, I need to post on all these other platforms. Maybe we can automate your prospecting on LinkedIn. Maybe we can automate your email outreach. Maybe we can automate some of the client communication so that it still feels personal, but those follow-ups are happening automatically, and then if they have questions, they'll reach out to you without you actually having to think about it. So we figure out what we can automate as far as those tasks go, and then after we automate as much as possible, then we start thinking about, okay, cool, what tasks are left? Let's document those as efficiently as possible, and then hire some virtual assistants and pass these tasks on. And then now you have your time back, and you have something that can scale, and then you can start actually throwing advertisements at it and scaling it at a much higher level and faster.
Okay, that really kind of brings that whole picture together, with that system. And again, it's a step by step in the direction that you did. If you start over here at the backside, you're not going to make it, right? You got to start over here at that beginning, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's totally makes sense. I'm going to have to dig in that a little deeper with you guys. I like it. So what other services do you guys offer with your team?
We can even everything from Google ads, building their website, getting them ranked on Google, running the Facebook and Instagram ads, getting them featured in the media. We pretty much do it all. Like if you need a business problem solved, if me and my team can't solve it, I can introduce you to somebody in my network who can.
So when you say getting featured in the media, what does that mean?
It means like stuff like this. Even like we help people get featured on podcasts, radio shows. We help them get featured in publications, and sometimes we can even help them get on TV and book stages if they're ready for that.
Oh, nice. I think Andrea said something about she works with people who are authors and helps them to get their books published and everything. Is that right?
Yep. Absolutely. Andrea is the head of our publicity department, and we can help people do all kinds of stuff like that.
Can you share a little bit with the audience about that publishing and the importance of having a book versus not having a book? What does that do to help you, say, elevate your expertise in who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So here's a good example that I like to use. If you walk into a networking event and somebody hands you a business card, where's that business card going to end up?
Usually it gets lost or in the trash or in a stack somewhere, and 6 months later or a year later you come across you and say, I wonder if they're still around, right?
Yep. If you go to a networking event and somebody walks up and says, hey, I wrote this book, I want you to have it, what are you going to do with that book?
Well, if you don't read it, it probably is going to sit on your shelf, and it's there, and you do come across it. You look at it off and on, but it never gets destroyed. Or sometimes, a lot of times, you just give it to someone else who you feel that could use that book with what the content is, just by what the name of the book is. I've done that before. It's like,
Exactly.
I've gone through and flipped through, and it's like, it's really, for me, it's just not like resonating. But then I would know somebody that did, and I said, oh my gosh, I got the perfect book for you, right? And you give it to them, and they're, they come back, they're so appreciative that they got a book, and it's like, wow, this was amazing. It's like, great,
Absolutely. One book can change a life. It's actually kind of crazy. I've met so many people that you ask them where their personal development journey, where their business journey started, and a lot of the time it's going to be credited back to a book. For me, one of the biggest turning points in my life was I read Think and Grow Rich and Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, and that impacted my life massively. So that's kind of something that I like to reference when the book topic comes up. But also, like, when you write a book, like, if people are looking into you and they see, oh, you wrote a book on the topic,
Right.
you're immediately cemented as that expert. People know, like, this person knows what they're talking about if they actually wrote a book about it. Like, that's just, it's kind of weird, and it's very weird because it's smoke and mirrors to an extent, especially in the entrepreneur community.
Right.
So many people actually go out and ghost write a book. Like, they won't write it, but they'll have somebody else write a book, they'll slap their name on it, and then they'll put it out there to cement themselves as that authority in that space.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to get those books out. I can remember when I've like always wanted to write a book, right? And I started writing one, and it was just like going on forever. And I woke up one morning, and I hear this voice say, Beverly, you're not writing an encyclopedia. And it's like, oh my gosh, right? It's like, okay, you're right. And I started pulling out chapters, for that book. And then I kept the other ones for another book and another book, right? So I think that's one of the things what stops a lot of people when they do get started in it is they just keep going on and on and on and on and on, and it's like it never ends. And interesting enough, after I got my book all figured out, had the chapters, was just getting the editing and stuff done, I was invited to an event that was a weekend-long event that said, learn how to write a book in a week. I'm like, are you kidding me? Right? Here I've been doing this for months, right? And it was like, okay, you just do these little things, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. And it was like, guess how I did my other books, right? So it doesn't have to be a difficult situation. Again, like when you know the steps, just like you introduced those 6 pillars, right? There's, I think, like 6 or 8 steps how to write a book in a week, and it really does work. So those formulations are something that we really need to step up and pay attention to when someone says, hey, I have 6 steps for you, or I have 6 pillars for you, or I have 6 or 5, or whatever it is. Pay attention, because obviously they've done it and it's worked, because that's what their business is, built upon themselves, right? On those 6 pillars, or whatever the case may be. Do you find that to be true?
find kind of a mixture to be true. You have like for instance with me, one thing that I'm dealing with right now is I've been building all of these systems for everybody else for the last few years, but I'm actually only just now being able to make the time to actually put all of these systems in place within my own company. So you'll find a balance. You'll find, like, there's a lot of people who I'm really, really good at working with other people.
Right.
But sitting down and dealing with myself.
You know, that is so true, because it's always easier to advertise or promote the other person than it is yourself.
Marketer's curse.
Yeah, something to that effect. Yeah.
Marketer's curse.
Yeah. I've never heard that comment before, but you know, you're right. It really is. And again, I think it is because we care about that other person, so we want to kind of do for the other person, and we kind of put ourselves on the back burner type of thing, right?
Yeah, it's also a little bit easier to look at other people's stuff and step back and take the emotion out of it. Whereas whenever you're looking at your stuff, it's a lot harder to step back and take the emotion out of it, because you have that emotional involvement in every step of the way of your business. You're like, ooh, I don't want to change it. That's how I've been doing it forever. But yet you look at someone else's business and you're like, man, you've been doing it that way forever, but it's not working. It's a lot easier to say that to somebody else than to look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, bro, I know you've been doing this for years, but it sucks. You got to change it. Most people don't want to do that stuff.
Yeah, well, we put ourselves in this little comfort zone, right? And so we kind of want to stay there. And you're able to recognize, like you say, other people's little comfort zone, and you're going to upset their apple cart, move them out of that comfort zone. But then when it comes to the self, it's like, not so much. That is so, so true. I find that a lot of times in the clients that I work, and I work with the emotional aspect of things. And so the fear that is built behind a lot of the different emotional things, because you have two main emotions, one's fear and one's love, and everything's built upon that. So whenever they get anxious or nervous or just a little bit scared, whatever it is, to do something different, the first thing that pops into their head is, well, what if it doesn't work? Okay, but what if it does? Right? And that kind of shocks them. It's like, oh, I guess I forgot that was an option. You know, so we get so busy, you know, being in that habitual thing, and we do live in a negative world. So it's like all those negative things, you know, are inundated in our thought processing continuously that we don't even realize, you know. And so when someone gives you a different option, it's like, oh. So I actually wrote a book on that. I wrote a book on that. It's called Which Side of the Fence Are You On? Yeah, because it's the opposite. We live in this world of duality. You know, if you're happy, great. If you're sad, if that's what you want, great. But you can't have both at the same time. Which one do you want? You want to be happy or you want to be sad? Can't have them both. So which side of the fence do you want to be on? So when you take all the opposites like that and start working with it, it's quite interesting of how your perspective changes.
One way that I've been able to really push a lot of breakthroughs with some of my clients and stuff like that is, do you know what the definition of insanity is, Beverly?
Yes, doing the same thing over and over and over, expecting a different outcome.
Awesome. So do you know what the difference between you and that billionaire over there is?
Yes.
What's the difference?
He changed it so he wasn't doing the insanity thing, right?
Exactly. He changed his habits and he got started.
Right. You know, and again, there's a good word, started. All the knowledge in the world is priceless. But, you know, it's not worth a penny if you don't take action upon it, right?
Yep. Not at all.
Yeah. And I think from what I've, you know, discovered with working with a lot of clients is just getting them off that starting block, you know, to start moving. Because when you're working with emotions, it doesn't taste good, doesn't feel good, doesn't sound good, Doesn't look good. But once you start moving through it, all of a sudden you begin to realize that it's such old, outdated database. And when I share with people and show them that 95% of that isn't even theirs. So all of that stuff that you're carrying, only 5% is your creation. The rest is the fuel that just kept building upon what you already had started. And so when I take them through a lot of the processing, I developed a 5-step system to make it go fast and easy. So you don't have to sit there and regurgitate and try to think and figure it out, because you'll never get to the cause. But if you want to eliminate it, we can start eliminating those things in 30 to 60 seconds by just following what I call the rah-rah system. It's kind of like your little thing that you shared with us today. So first off, you got to recognize you have an issue. Make the choice that you want to change it. Acknowledge it as being your truth. That's the toughest one for people to get, because they don't want to acknowledge that that's their truth, because it was when it was created. Not now, but it was the database of information that made it true at that time. So when you can acknowledge that that was the truth, your subconscious relaxes, because that's where it's buried and it's running on autopilot. Then you can release it. And once you release it, you replace it with the new database of information, your new truth, and that takes over and kind of rewires that cell memory, and that becomes running on autopilot, and then you accept and embrace that as being your new truth. And it really works pretty fast, and once people start using it, they start picking up that pace, because they're noticing the difference, and the more they do it, the greater the difference. And then they start really looking into some deep stuff, where we go into sometimes a half hour to an hour clearing that just moves so much out of the way that it's like they get a new life. They begin to find their true identity, and then they find their purpose and how to fulfill that, which then goes right into the pillars of what you were just saying, right?
Absolutely. I love that. Are you an NLP practitioner by chance?
No, I am not.
That's awesome. It's that's very similar. That's very similar to the method of clearings that a lot of NLP practitioners do, where they go in and they have you address specific events, and then you address it, you accept it, and then you rewire it and figure out what the belief was and what you wish that you would have known and all of that stuff, and like you let go of it. And it's a beautiful thing, and I love that your 5 steps very straightforward and like make it easy to understand, like, hey, this is literally how you rewire your brain.
Right. Yeah, I teach people how to actually become a self-discovery archaeologist as an identity revelation specialist, because I had lost my identity. I mean, totally lost it, to the point to where I was not me. I was not living my dream, and I was right on the edge of suicide when my journey shifted.
Wow.
And it was recovering my identity, because most of us are identified by association, by what you do, or who you're married to, or how many kids you have, or what you do out in the in the community. But you're not really identified by who you are at heart.
Yep.
Right? And
most people don't even know who they are.
Exactly. And once you know who you are, it's a lot easier to discover what your why is and what your purpose is. So as an archaeologist, you just kind of start moving away the things that you're not. That's the easiest way to go at it. Well, I know I'm not that, but I keep acting like that. Okay, let's get rid of that. Well, I know I'm not that, let's get rid of it, right? And that's where that speed up comes with those 5 little steps, because as soon as you recognize that that's not you, you can run through that little script, and boom, that starts to clear up, and then the next one clears up, and you start seeing someone else emerge, and it's pretty amazing to watch that.
That's exactly what happens. So would you believe that just over a few years ago, I was addicted to drugs, I was suicidal, I was dealing drugs, and I was actually diagnosed with dissociative bipolar schizophrenia?
See, when you actually become your own archaeologist and know what you're not, Look what you turn into. Look at this blossom, that you became. And that is so true with everyone. And to hear those stories, and it's like, hey, I did it, and so can you. You give people hope, right?
Yep.
And that's what is really needed in the world today is a hand up, not a handout. A hand up, a little direction, and say, hey, there's so much more potential inside of you. I see something that you don't see. Are you ready to go find what I just saw? And again, that's a choice. Not everyone wants to take that choice, right?
Yep.
Right.
That's what most people need right now. Most people are lost. They don't know who they are, and they're scared to do something different because they don't really know what's out there, and they don't know what options they have.
Right.
So they're scared to step outside of whatever environment they're in because they don't know what's on the other side of that.
Right.
Sometimes the devil is less scary than the beautiful thing over there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, like I had said earlier, well, what if it's better over there? If it's not, you can always come back, right? But what if it is? You don't want to come back, right? And so you have those options. And again, that's that duality world, right? Yeah.
We have the choice to keep moving until we find the place that we're comfortable, we feel safe, and we feel accepted. And if you choose comfort over where you're actually accepted and loved and like encouraged to grow and be you, then that's on you. We can't make you keep moving and go find that place. That's up to you. You gotta come on. We can be over here like, hey, we'll love you over here. We'll help you be everything you want to be over here. But if they're sitting over there at their job they're comfortable with their family they're comfortable with, they're like, I'm good here.
Right.
I don't know what's over here.
Right. Yeah, why rock the boat, right? And and you find that a lot of people are really miserable at the job that they're doing, yet they don't want to change because it's the paycheck that they've created a miserable comfortability, right? And the way the world has been changing here over the last several months has upset a lot of apple carts, and again, when you look at, people are spending more time with themselves. They're not out in society, and all of a sudden it's like they're not so sure they like themselves or like their world or like what's going on, and that enhances that fear. And so, it's so needed out there now to get these messages out that you're not alone. There is someone out there. All you got to do is reach out. Just reach out. And that's one of the hardest things to do, is to ask for assistance, right? Ask for assistance. It's not help. Don't say help, because help all of a sudden makes it sound like I don't know how to do anything. But when you ask for assistance, you start receiving guidance. And there's so much out there today. When I started my journey back in the 70s, and I was in the Midwest, there was absolutely nothing there. Nothing at all. And the one book that really started turning things around for me was written by Robert Winger, and it was called Looking Out for Number One. Most people probably have never ever heard of that book, but I found it in Target on a reduced shelf book, and I'm like, wow, it's the number one bestseller. I wasn't a reader. I picked it up, I took it home, I started to read it. It didn't make sense. I couldn't even get through a couple pages. I put it down. I tried it again, and I put it down. 6 months later, I picked that book up, and I could not put it down. So when the student's ready, the teacher will appear, and vice versa. And then being able to be a part of this whole community and what's going on in the world today, in the advancements that have been made and the opportunities. There's coaches all over, there's counselors all over, there's different formulas. You mentioned NLP, I'm familiar with it. There's a lot of ways out there to make you a better you, and that's why I had the theme of my show being that best you that you can be, because every day, what are you going to do to make yourself an even better you than you were the day before? And it doesn't have to be big aha things, just one little thing, right? One little thing, right?
Have you ever read The Compound Effect?
No, I have not.
It's wow. For some reason I can't remember who it's by at the moment, but it's if you look up The Compound Effect, you'll find it. But it's all about the power of habits and the power of small things, and it talks about how all the little bitty things make up the giant things.
Exactly. I think a lot of us by habit, we want that big thing out there, right? And so it's like we keep striving to get that big thing, but we forget to measure the small things.
Yep.
Right? It's kind of... Go ahead.
So I like to, whenever this comes up, I always like to refer to entrepreneurs, because too many of them come in and they're like, oh, I gotta make $1 million, and then when they close a client, they don't appreciate it. When they close a client, they don't appreciate it. They're like, oh, I gotta get to $1 million, when, dude, you just closed 10 grand in a week or two. You were a couple weeks ago, you were only closing one client, or you didn't have any clients. Stop and appreciate that. Or a week ago, you didn't have this many clients. You have more clients than you did. You're growing, but you're not appreciating that. And we do that to ourselves a lot. And whether it's business or personally, we don't appreciate that. When people go on their weight loss journey, they're like, oh, I gotta lose all this weight right now. And it doesn't happen like that. Yes. And then they get disappointed, they get distraught, and then they don't appreciate, oh, I just lost a pound in a couple weeks. I lost another pound this week. They're like, oh, I didn't lose my 25 pounds.
Well, yeah, that, you're so right. You're so right. And it is about appreciating the little things in life, because it's those little things that make it big. It's the same thing working with the emotional releases and stuff. When you start releasing all these little things, all of a sudden the big aha moments show up. And if you were going to go after that big aha moment, you didn't even know it existed. Right? So appreciate the little things. And I love that word, appreciate. You can be grateful for a lot of things, but when you can really appreciate it, because you don't always like what it is that you can appreciate, because somebody just threw something in your face that you had to really swallow it and regurgitate it and stir it up, and say, okay, you were right. I appreciate you for pointing that out, because that is something, that is a struggle that I really need to get rid of, that habit, or get rid of that emotional block, get rid of whatever it is, right, to come out the other side and have more. So appreciate one client at a time, because otherwise it's no client, no client, no client, or whatever the case may be, right?
Absolutely. And one thing that I do want to point out, and this is something that I've been having a hard time learning, because for the last few years, I've literally been on this journey of learning to like myself, because from where I came from, that was very, very hard. And it comes down to learning to love yourself enough to appreciate the little things that you make happen.
Right.
And when you learn to wake up in the morning and say, dude, Trey, I love you. You did so much cool stuff yesterday. You're gonna feel so much better about going into that day than if you wake up in the morning and you're like, I didn't do enough yesterday.
Right. Exactly. And that's so true. There's a major difference between liking and loving. And it goes back to that being grateful and being appreciative. Right? So when you can learn to love yourself a lot faster than you can learn to like yourself. And when you say like yourself, it's really not about liking yourself. It's about liking the actions and the outcomes that you get. Right? Because everything is an action and a reaction. It's your interpretation with the database of information that you currently have. And that's what happens, back throughout your childhood and even early adult life, and even yesterday. What happens is you have your old database that's running with information on autopilot coming from the subconscious of what's been there, that when you're looking to make a new step or you make a commitment and then all of a sudden you have buyer's remorse because of that, again, you're recognizing that I want to change, but I don't know how to change. And the subconscious says, well, I ain't going to let you change, because it's referring on old database, right? That's why you've got to acknowledge that it was a truth. And when you can tell the subconscious, you're right, the subconscious says, yeah, okay. And it lets its guard down so that you can shift it and eliminate it. And that is what changes the conflict within the inner self. When you can stop the battle within, there's no more war. Right?
That is so true.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. It's kind of terrifying to think about the prisons that we'll put ourselves in. Because when I first started doing all of this stuff, like, I'd meet prospects, I'd meet with potential clients, I'd sit down with millionaires, and they'd want to work with me. But I wouldn't have the confidence to show up for them the way that they wanted me to show up at first, because in the back of my mind, I was like, oh man, I was selling drugs a year ago. Why would these people listen to me? Like,
Right.
I'm not worth that. And then finally, like, people forced into my head that, hey, you get results. You actually care about these people. That's why they want to listen to you. And it eventually sunk in, but I had to accept that for me to actually show up for people the way that they knew I could show up for them, but I was actually failing them because I had myself in a prison.
And that's so true. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we actually do imprison ourselves a lot of times unconsciously, and then when we do recognize those prisons, we justify them, or we try to hide them, shove them in that closet, right? But you know what? Closet doors can be removed, and when the least opportune time happens, that closet door sometimes falls down and we find ourselves just exploding and out of control and not knowing why. Right? Oh, Trey, this has been so awesome. Just listening to your story, where you come from and how you overcame it, and all the things that you're doing, and these 6 pillars that you put out there really do make sense, on it from a business standpoint. But even if you take those 6 pillars and take the format that's built behind them, you can incorporate that into your personal life, you can incorporate that into your spiritual life, and just your day-to-day living, right?
I never really thought about it, but as soon as you said it, my brain put it all together, and I was like, oh, I need to do this to my life right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's great. So now that gives you another direction to go.
Yep.
So now you can be a coach in all these other avenues as well. See?
Whew, I don't know about that. I'm actually I'm working with multiple mentors right now, working on my own like personal foundations as far as routine and things like that, because I don't have one right now, and my team hates me for it, because I need to be able to show up consistently for them at these times.
Right.
And I'm only recently being able to commit and make those things happen because I didn't have a routine. I didn't love myself enough to say, hey, we got to sit down and make a routine, bro. And recently I've been doing that. And that's recently I've also been having the biggest wins that I've had, because people see that. I'm saying, hey, I love you, bro. And that confidence comes out.
Right. I had the honor to be on a Women's Empowerment 2020 Summit, and we just did all the recordings over the weekend, and it's on confidence. And everybody had to take the F out of confidence and create an F word, and then capitalize on how that helped you build confidence in your life to take you from where you were to where you are. What an eye-opener. So it's going to be really exciting to see that when it comes out, because it was amazing. It was just amazing when you can start to isolate things like that. So confidence is key, but what builds that confidence is your ability to trust yourself and to believe in yourself, right? And that's part of learning how to like yourself. Loving yourself can be easy. Liking yourself, Takes a little more work.
Absolutely.
So, oh my gosh, Trey, we're gonna have to have you come back on the show again. This was a delight. And then you can share how you took those 5 pillars and put them into your personal life.
I'll definitely make that happen because I hadn't really thought about approaching it the same way, but now I know that over the next couple days I'm gonna be tearing my life apart and figuring out how do I attract people into it, how do I get them to stick around, like what am I doing for myself to feel fulfilled, and then what am I doing to retain all those things? Where are all of my personal finances going? And then how am I choosing who to keep around?
Pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yep.
There you go.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so if you're in a relationship, if you have a partner, that's going to just really enhance that relationship.
Definitely. That's fascinating. I never would have thought about it like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, we'll have to follow up on that. Okay, let's do it. So, Trey, one thing that you want to share with the audience before we call it a show.
One thing that I want to share with the audience. Stop over-complicating everything. Business isn't as complicated as we make it. Our emotions aren't as complicated as we make it. We just overthink it. Everything can be simplified. Stop shooting yourself in the foot. I don't care if we're talking about relationships, business, whatever it is. Stop overcomplicating it. Just do it. Be yourself. Go out there and make it happen.
Great advice. Thank you again so much for being on the show. It's time now to say go out there, be that best you that you can be, because Trey and I, we're going to be the best we that we can be. We'll see you all on the next show.